Thanks, George. I'll let you know. No, no, no. Second, right? Yep, we're just finishing getting set, George. Oh, this might be dead. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the Town of Monroe Planning Board meeting for the month of March, March 19th, 2024. Noreen, if I can get a roll call.
Branson out this evening. Jeff Manson.
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Napoli.
Aye.
Out. And Robert Garst.
Aye.
Covering for
Okay.
Before we get started, I'd just like to point out the fire exits. There's the main door to the building in the front, out this way, 2 fire doors behind you, and when you come out this door to the left, you can get right out to the left. If I can ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. pledge allegiance to the flag of the Our first application is Monroe Commons. Would you like the extra microphone so that you don't have to share as much?
These microphones aren't on?
They should be.
Just take the stand off the podium.
Take the stand.
No, for the extra microphone. You can use a third stand. Okay, so before we get started with your introduction, so at this point with Monroe Commons, we are going through the preliminary version of the final EIS. So just as a reminder for the board, we had started working with Monroe Commons back in 2020. We had a positive declaration and decided we were doing a full EIS. We did a scoping session, determined what would be reviewed as part of the project, and we'd worked through the draft environmental for a while until we've got it in its current form. Commentary was provided, and now we're kind of getting the final format together. Ashley, if I could have you explain a little bit more about what our purpose is this evening and going forward.
Sure. So as you note, you had the draft environmental impact statement before you. You had a public hearing on that and accepted comments on that. The FEIS now, it is the planning board's document, so it's something that's written in the planning board's voice, but it's, as is typical with these, the applicant prepares a version of that for the planning board to review and ultimately accept once it's determined to be adequate as its own. So the question is whether the FEIS is adequately addressing all of the substantive comments that were previously made on that draft environmental impact statement, and whether it completely addresses all the required mitigation measures and all of those substantive comments. You do have Aaron Werner here as well from AKRF, if he has anything to add on the process of where we are.
It'll light up red when you speak into it if you're close enough.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right. Yeah, so the public hearing was back in December. AKRF, along with the 5 other consultants that have been working on this project, CHA, CALA, Weston and Sampson, Ashley's office, Sean's office, we provided written comments in addition to comments that came in from the public and other involved agencies. So since the public hearing, the applicant has worked on responding to those comments and presenting any new information on the project, and new plans, et cetera, that they worked on between that public hearing and the submission of this final EIS. So we put together our respective comments. We got them out today. Unfortunately, there was a lot of material to go through. I was sick for a week during the time when this was sent in. I tried our best to get it out sooner, but we coordinated today on getting all these memos in. And the long story short is we have some comments that need to be addressed. We don't believe it's ready for it to be officially adopted as the final EIS just yet. We're happy to work on, have meetings with the applicant to go over some of these comments. But ultimately, I think they're going to have to resubmit. And another thing to be discussed tonight is that technically after the public hearing, there's a 45-day period where your FEIS is supposed to be adopted. We're well past that because it took a while for them to put it together. So I think for the record, it would make sense just for the board to come to an understanding with the applicant tonight that the extension of time on adoption of the FEIS is necessary before it can be determined to be adequate. So, you have our comment memos. I know there's a lot of material to go through. I'm happy to answer any questions I can. I'm not the traffic engineer in my office who did a lot of the work on this, but I can certainly have her come to a future meeting when this is resubmitted to discuss some of these things.
Very much. So I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manson, members of the board. Thank you to the consultants and Noreen for working with us. We submitted a draft final environmental impact statement last month that we believed was complete and addressed all the substantive comments on the DEIS as SECRA requires. We did receive your consultant memos this afternoon. We are hoping your board can deem the document complete tonight, subject to making some of the revisions requested by your consultants. We have, begun to review them. We have several questions about them. But again, this is project, I know you noted that deposit declaration was issued in 2020. In our view, this project's been reviewed for even further back since then. So, we're looking forward to finally allowing this project to move forward to the approval so the various agencies can issue their respective determinations. And we look forward to continuing to work with your board on the site plan approval. But right now, we're looking to draw the SECRA process to a close. We're happy to work with your consultants and answer any questions you have. Again, we just got these memos 3 o'clock this afternoon and have not completely digested them. But our intent is to, again, work with your consultants, but we're hoping your board can adopt a completeness determination tonight, subject to us making any of the revisions, which I think was a similar arrangement we had with the DEIS.
For purposes of our minutes, if I can just ask everyone to introduce yourselves and what firm you're from?
Mr. Manson.
Thanks.
For the record, my name is Daniel Richmond. I'm with the law firm Zarin and Steinmetz on behalf of the applicant.
Vince Peterzak, Peterzak and Fowl.
John Dahlgren, Tim Miller Associates, we're the planners.
Ken Worsted, Creighton Manning Engineering, traffic consultant for the applicant.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's on.
No. Yep.
One on the right? I turned that one on.
It's on? Is it not on?
George, which one is not on?
We're all on.
Top switch. Okay.
Testing.
Thank you. So, starters, I think I'd like to go over. I think I'd like to start with getting some comments from our consultants. Then we can get some of your questions answered and talk about where we're at.
Okay.
Sean, can we start with you?
Sure. So I did a comment memo, as Aaron had discussed earlier. I would say a majority of my comments were with regards to the plans in SWIP. Fortunately, with the no new So we had concerns because there was no new plans submitted, so there was nothing to be able to compare the SWIP with the plans, so, future submissions of the FEIS should include the plans. As we discussed last time, the applicant was going to do additional geotechnical analysis between the completeness of the DEIS and the FEIS. The applicant, however, did provide a blasting plan in lieu of additional geotechnical analysis. I had some comments on the blasting plan that was provided. with regards to the connection to the VMG property. So obviously they have utility connections and access connections to. I had questions essentially with regards to the utilities and access. Should those improvements not be brought all the way to the property line, how will the applicant's traffic study and their site plan work should those connections not be made at the time that the Monroe Commons project is completed? That was basically the high-level comments that I had. The rest were more, technical and minor with regards to the FEIS. But, so.
Ashley?
So I had provided a comment memo as well. There were a few things in mind that it would be appropriate for the board to weigh in on, get the board's input on whether they rest or not that I had highlighted for you. I could run through those if you would like.
Please.
First is with respect to, and it's comment 3-7 and their response to comment 3-7. So I did have some modifications to the language of their response, but for the planning board to consider whether you agree with the conclusion that in the event the proposed zoning amendments are not adopted, or in the event it's determined that they do need a variance from the landscape buffer requirement adjacent to residential districts in Woodbury and the village of Kira whether applicants conclude that wouldn't be as act if they had to. You recall the project involves zoning amendments that are being considered by the town. Are adopting those? Okay, so the applicants indicated that they believe the town is agreeable to adopting those proposed zoning amendments for the project, and they also believe that they would get a favorable determination from the building inspector on the applicability of the landscape buffer provision I had mentioned. So they're saying in the event those two items are not in their favor, they are of the position that there would not be any significant impacts that would need to be addressed.
Can I just briefly respond to that?
Actually, I was going to ask if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mintz. SECRA is about impacts analysis, the environmental impacts. It's not about really which laws apply or what, regulatory scheme applies. So, for example, with respect to the 25-foot landscape buffer, we don't think it applies for particular legal reasons as we've written to the building inspector. But more importantly, I think to the SECRA issue is that we have adequately mitigated the buffer. We're providing ample landscaping. I think the minimal comments we got from Kyla on the landscape plan on response to the FAS indicate that. We worked hard to address our concerns. So I think your board should feel comfortable, regardless or not of whether the building inspector ultimately agrees with us with respect to whether or not the 25 landscape buffer doesn't apply because the neighboring property is not in town of Monroe. But regardless, we think that, again, from an impact analysis, which is SECRA's focus, we think we've shown that those impacts have been avoided to the maximum extent practicable or mitigated as SECRA requires.
That was my comment to the board, that it's for the board to state whether or not they agree with that conclusion. So thank you for summarizing what you believe to be why it's been mitigated or why it's been addressed, but I was just pointing out for the board to make sure you're on board with that.
So maybe we should take these up for discussion kind of point by point. Okay. I too had a similar thought, particularly in relation to the amendments to the zoning that you're going in front of the town board for. Were those not to be granted by the town board? Is the applicant's intention to go to the ZBA with that? And if the ZBA were to find against that, what would we expect this project would look like? I guess if down the road, no approval was granted for those things, what kind of changes would we have to expect to this project? And because that goes to impact.
Well, again, I think to the point, again, of an impact analysis, with respect to the zoning amendments, I think we've shown how this project, as currently formulated, again, avoids or minimizes or mitigates the significant adverse impacts to the maximum extent practical as SEQA requires. So if we have to go to the ZBA, which I hope not to have to do, because I think it's an unnecessary step for this project, but if we have to, I think we're going to be able to show that we easily pass the applicable area variance balancing test. To your question of what the if the zoning board rejected the variances, again, we'd have several different options, what the applicant would like to do, if we like to challenge that, what have you. I guess they do have the option of, seeing what the zoning board's address impacts are, but again, those would be lesser impacts. Ultimately, the zoning board would be then an involved agency in this review, and they would be required to issue their own secret findings, as every involved agency must. So they could, in their secret findings, address any impacts that they, I think we've shown that we have more than adequately addressed the project's impacts from that perspective, but that could be discussed with the zoning board.
I certainly understand the amendments that are being proposed to the zoning. If someone could just give me a brief overview on the landscape buffer and what the issue is there for the benefit of myself and the rest of the board.
Lynn?
Sure, so there's a requirement in the code that when you have a non-residential use adjacent to a residential district, the code requires there to be within the side and rear yards, landscape buffer of 25 feet to screen those adjacent residential districts. And the question here is whether that applies where the adjacent residential districts aren't located in the town of Monroe, they're located in adjacent municipalities. So we discussed this with the consultants, and my understanding is they're going to be seeking building inspector. But the question here is because ultimately those things, whether they need variances or the zoning amendments, that's all going to have to happen before you could, approve the project, of course. But the question is whether in the event they needed those, do you agree that they have mitigated impacts of any such?
Okay, I'm just going through the board for their. Bob, any thoughts?
No.
Pat?
Are we potentially getting the cart before the horse here? Is there if we approve something tonight or take an action, can it be improper?
You won't be taking any action on the project. This is in discussing the adequacy of the FEIS and whether there is anything else that needs to be addressed in terms of impacts from the potential need for these variances.
Okay, just purposes, what potential action are we going to take tonight, if any?
I would be recommending that you not be accepting the FEIS as complete yet, so I wouldn't be recommending any action this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's just let the building department do their thing, and we'll just, everything seems like it's going along. Just keep it going.
I'm comfortable that these issues have been addressed, that particularly in relation to the amendments to the zoning, we were talking about that day one. This was always a part of that project, and we've talked about it quite a bit. I think we understand what the issue is there, and we'll see, as far as the site plan approval, we'll see what the building inspector says. But as far as the impacts for seeker, it's been addressed, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr.
Everyone comfortable with that? Okay.
See,
Next point, Ashley.
Next one dealt with the terrain adaptable parking alternative, and back when you were reviewing the DIS, there was discussion about whether there would be a further alternative in that regard, so whether you are satisfied with the analysis that's been presented in the FEIS, or if you do, or the DEIS rather, or if you do feel there is further analysis warranted.
Mr. Richmond?
Mr. Manson, I think we have, again, adequately explored all alternatives. I think, as you've indicated, this is not a new project for this board. It's been before your board.
Get closer to the
Speak
mic,
into the
please.
mic.
Sorry. This project is not a new project. Your board has been before you for several times. We've discussed, multiple iterations of the project and its alternatives. They were amply discussed in the DIS, including the terrain adaptable alternative. I can't recall if there was a specific comment on the terrain alternative.
The comment was that it didn't include a terrain, or an alternative with terrain adaptable parking, and instead relied on the current proposal and said that that's incorporated the terrain adaptable parking. So the question for the board was whether they, agree that that's sufficient, or if you thought another alternative was warranted.
I think at this point in the analysis, we've really beat the alternatives to death. I think, that it is our belief that we have, tried to make this project as closely in harmony with the topography and the site's constraints as much as possible. We've respected the wetlands. We're having minimal impacts there. So again, at this point, I don't think there's any further need for a further alternatives discussion.
Comments from the board?
Yeah, in a second.
I'm inclined to go with what our professionals recommend.
Onward.
I know we talked a bit about a terrain adaptable option, and frankly, it didn't seem the best option from this site. We did do a site visit, an extensive site visit, and walked the entire property. And frankly, I don't think that would be a conducive solution for this type of project. If this was merely an office building, perhaps it would be more of a consideration, but I don't think it's in the best interest of those who would be coming to Monroe Commons to have a terrain adaptable parking solution. So I don't think it was ever in great consideration, in part for that reason. Any other?
Yeah, I'm just not clear on, you're saying that you've looked at everything and we beat it to death, so to speak, but does that mean that you're willing to walk away from the project rather than change something, to look for that next alternative if it doesn't work the way it is?
No, I think.
Maybe if I could clarify too, the comment that it was whether the board agrees that the current proposal is the most, terrain adaptable that would be appropriate, and that no further analysis is warranted. So my comment was meant to point that out for the board about whether you're agreeable to that.
Now, Mr. Garstack, the project that's before your board has been a result of extensive discussions with your board, and that's where my comment came from. We're certainly committed to making this project happen and are going to advance it. My sole point is that I think, as Mr. Manson indicated, we've looked at various alternatives, ways to reform the project, and I think, again, this has been a long process. I think, we had a DIS that comprehensively looked over all these issues, and I think it's been determined along the way that the terrain adaptable, we've incorporated as much as possible into the current project. And I think, again, the area of analysis should be getting smaller and smaller as we get closer to the finish line.
So what are we suggesting? What options do we like?
Well, I think it comes down to, do we feel that we adequately looked at the options, that the EIS examined the various options and put its best foot forward, so to speak, as far as what the best solution was. And there was a lot, again, going back again to the beginning of this project, one of the key things that the applicant always stressed was, we're looking to make this work in the space that's there. There's a significant hill rising towards the back of the property. The project takes advantage by setting the building back into that, so it's less intrusive and obvious. The parking works its way around the side and the back of the building to fit in with the terrain that's there as much as possible. So we have parking into level 2, parking into level 3 on the back. So there is some terrain adaptability already in this project. Where it really came down to an issue was in the front parking lot, in the big sheet of parking. But for those of you who walk the project site, that front area is relatively level to begin with. So you're not going to get the advantage from terrain adaptability on top of what the inconvenience is to that of the patrons of the center. So I think we kind of moved past that at that point. Aaron?
I can just add that, you did deem the DEIS complete, and the analysis that they did there was several alternatives. There was a multiple building alternative, there was a no wetlands permit alternative, there was this terrain adaptable alternative, which they're saying their project as proposed is doing the best they can on that concept. Given the uses, especially with the fact that there's retail going to be here with folks with carts moving, it's difficult to navigate a slope with a shopping cart, maybe with strollers with children especially also. And I think the terrain adaptable concept was introduced in the scoping process because mostly, I think maybe because of comments from CALA on having the landscaping and the stormwater be, in a way that can help the plants survive and also limit the grading and things like that. But, they as part of their process have said that this is the best they can to accommodate given the use and the patrons that are going to use this site. So, as that all if that a lot of alternative.
I'm comfortable that it is. Anyone on the board have another thought?
Well, I haven't been out there since the original
Yeah.
walkthrough. And I think I better understand what's going on now and where the potential disagreement or conflict is. And I would, going forward with it, given the explanation.
Any other comments? Moving on.
I think that was the items I had highlighted for the board to confirm that are adequate. Oh, one more about attracting residential growth and whether there was sufficient analysis on, they had given some reasoning as far as where the people who are going to work at the establishment are likely to reside and why they wouldn't be expecting that it would attract new residential growth into the town. So for the board to verify that you agree with that analysis, or if you think something further was required.
Again, I'm going to try and dig up the section that she's referring to, but I think, again, we did address.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying you didn't address that, I'm just asking the board if they agree that that's sufficiently addressed.
Well, I think, again, so your letter actually quotes from the DIS comment, which we responded to. Sorry.
I can pull that closer to you if it's more comfortable.
Okay. Your letter, I guess, quotes from your comment that we responded to in comment 22-2 of the FEIS, where we discussed the physical and economics of the DIS, noted they provide a detailed assessment. We talked about retail trade being the #1 employer in the town. We talked about, we had a figure showing job sector relationships, showing that retail businesses employ the largest percentage of Monroe residents as compared. And I think it provided other analysis showing that the development is not expected to result in this significant residential growth to support the development, but rather would serve the growing community of Curious Joel, Palm Tree, and employ in-town residents.
Again, I wasn't saying you did not respond to the comment. I was flagging it for the board to confirm whether they agree it's been sufficiently responded to.
I happened to review that section this afternoon. I guess my question would be in relation to this. A fair portion of the building is office space, and I'm thinking back to when we were reviewing the floor plans and that sort of thing. What kind of businesses would we anticipate those offices attracting? And are we thinking the local Monroe, Palm Tree, Woodbury area businesses, or from throughout Orange County?
Sure. I think we made an assumption in the document and kind of throughout our analysis that a lot of the businesses would be related to Curious Joel, town of Palm Tree, and local Woodbury, Monroe, in terms of both the retail and the office is kind of supporting the growth in new businesses, possibly, or existing businesses in the village who want to relocate to a new office space. So that was our assumption, is that it wouldn't be drawing from outside or New York City. It's primarily for local businesses.
When I was reading about that, so one of the things that we discussed along the way, actually in relation to this and some other projects, is the reality is there's a fair amount of retail in the Monroe-Woodbury area already, particularly between the Commons and Harriman Commons and the complex where Walmart is. And it's a mix of people who are employed there. Those centers employ a lot of people from within 10 minutes of those centers. There are also a lot of people who come into the area who live in other parts of the county or other parts of the state. I'm also employed by BJ's. My store manager's from Brooklyn. But I don't find that those retail situations are really bringing more people to live in Monroe. People are living in all kinds of areas, and they're coming to work in Monroe because there are opportunities here. And that's kind of what I was curious about in relation to the offices. If it's really to provide some office space for businesses that don't have that in Palm Tree and Monroe and Woodbury in the surrounding communities, then it's a very similar situation in my mind, and that the residential impacts are not that significant. The residential impacts will come from the new residences, not so much from the addition of Monroe Commons, which will support the residential growth that's happening. Thoughts from the board, Pat?
So just a question, will this facility be closed on the Sabbath? Or like the other facilities in Curious Joel? Or will this be open at all times?
I believe most of the businesses would be closed during the Sabbath. The hotel, I'm not certain about, but
I think the hotel would be open.
yeah,
For people who are visiting
right.
the area for the Sabbath and can't travel that day, so they could walk to and from. But again, that doesn't add to residential growth in the area.
So if that's the case, it would most likely mimic the other buildings in Curious Joel in terms of accessibility, which would probably limit the amount of traffic from non-Curious Joel folks, I would imagine. So
Isaac Gross.
Gross.
Do I need my address? No. I think the answer is.
Just pull the microphone a little closer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, now it's better.
Better.
I think the answer is the spaces by itself will be rented out to whoever the clients will be. Now, there is probably going to be in the medical areas and in some offices, as well as retail, spaces that will be rented out to people that have no problem and are not from the community. And if they are, they will be open on any time, whenever they want. It's not the business. Where we can't open ourselves, if we have a business, we can't allow to be open on Saturday, Shabbos. But if it is rented out to a person, let's say we're going to have their doctor that has their own office there, and they're open on Saturday, that's not a problem. And that's the plan for this project, to rent it out to whoever wants to be. And if they decide to be open, they can be open. So that would allow any traffic. In addition to it is the hotel that we discussed will be open on Saturday, and there would not be a problem with that.
Thank you.
Bob? Thoughts?
No.
Nick?
No, but I do notice the gentleman with his hand up.
Thanks.
Is that,
So, for the gentleman with your hand up and for those joining us tonight, we're at a point in the process where we're not taking public comment. We've had a couple of opportunities already. There may be a further opportunity as the project moves on and we get into the site plan and finalizing that. Keep in mind that we're working through state regulated process here. So there was a extensive scoping session that involved the public, and we welcome comments then, both in written and in commentary, and as well as when we were working on the draft environmental. But at this time, in this part of the process, we're working through a technical portion of the project. Pardon me? I'm sorry, sir. He's one of the applicants. I understand that, sir. But
So if I could just weigh in, so this isn't a public hearing, and the board doesn't have a public comment section at their meeting. So the board is in receipt of any written comments that you have, and they'll address those as is appropriate. But right now, it's focusing on talking with the applicant about this document, but I would acknowledge that any comments you had sent in, those will be, shared with the board. They've already been shared with the board and addressed as appropriate.
So as a taxpayer, I have the right to comment when somebody in the audience, not a member of the panel, has the right to speak. Is that correct?
you don't have to be sitting on the panel to be part of the applicant team.
I'm a taxpayer.
I understand that, sir, but you're not one of the applicants. So you don't have an opportunity to speak at this meeting. This is a work session, effectively, for this portion of the project, and
I'm just saying there's a lot of inaccuracies, 15% vacancy rates in town.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to stop. We have some work we need to get done. Let me assure you, we have spent more than 3 years working on this. We're pretty familiar with some of the details. Thank you, sir.
I've been a business owner and a resident and a taxpayer contributing to this town. I will stop. Thank you very much.
Kindly. Okay.
No findings have been,
There was a public comment period on the DEIS, and that's what this document's responding to, anything that was given on that. So if there are comments that are submitted, again, there's the way the process goes after this document's finalized, there's going to be, the next step is to adopt the findings. Before then, that the FEIS does go out for the public to consider. Public can, if they choose to submit comments, the board's not obligated to respond to those or to do anything in response to them, but if the board sees fit to address them.
And they haven't responded to my comments, do I have to wait 10 years, or
Yeah, I think you have to wait for the,
taxes, or how's it work?
I think if,
My business don't contribute enough?
if
It works according to the laws of New York State. Let me assure you, when,
New York State require an ample amount of time for residents to be addressed.
Again,
which,
this
which,
has been,
which
there's
has been
public
provided
hearings,
on multiple
there's been-
occasions.
I haven't received anything.
It's
because
been
we're going
published,
through the.
it's been published, it's been online. The public hearing was in December, I believe, and then there was a written comment period. So again, I mean, you are free to submit your written comments, and they'll be considered as appropriate in accordance with the regulations. But if we can keep moving on, I believe, was the board agreeable with that? There is no further analysis? Okay.
Will there be
And-
another opportunity for public discussion, or that's for us to decide?
There's not going to be another public, you've already had a public hearing.
Yeah.
So whether there's a waiting period between the finalization of the FEIS and your next step in the seeker process, which is adopting the finding statement, so whether there are comments that would be submitted in that time period, the board's not obligated to respond to those or to change anything, in response, but if something's raised that the board deems appropriate to respond to, then you can at that time.
I
So
mean,
it's
I
up
think,
to
I
us.
think
Can I just,
I think
It's
the
up-
simple answer to that, Pat, is through the rest of the FEIS process and finalizing the environmental, there's not an opportunity for public comment. There may be before the final resolution is or isn't adopted. But that's down the road and to be determined. Tonight, we're working on an environmental study.
Information has changed since the last public comment that the panel has presented to the board, and we haven't had an opportunity for public comment on the changed information, is my point. We can't just go proactively, go back to December, and then other things being submitted by the panel. You just can't do that. 6 months later, there's 15 different submissions. I want to address specifically what was discussed about the retail. We have 15% vacancy rate, and they're saying that it's going to provide jobs to who? I own a business in one of the biggest ports.
Sir, enough. I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you continue. We have work to get done here. It is important. So one more comment before we move on, if I can, gentlemen. For those of you who are here tonight, for those of you who are watching tonight, or later on, absolutely. In the town of Monroe, our agenda is published in advance. You can find that on the town of Monroe website. The documents that are being submitted are in a project folder through the planning board. You can access this information. Not only is everyone welcome to attend our meetings and observe what's going on in these meetings, but we are broadcasted out on Channel 22. You are able to watch all of our meetings right through the town website under the board doc section, and you can find the videos on YouTube. So I strongly encourage people to watch what is going on here, pay attention, and look for your opportunities to get involved and to have participation, because that's when we need to hear from you, please. Thank you. Okay, I think we're comfortable with that as well, and appreciate Ashley's comment towards that. Anything else,
Do the
Ashley?
applicant have any questions on any of my other comments? I know you have not had them for,
let me just quickly take a look, Ashley.
It's a process question, yes.
did
So-
you provide comments, you're saying, on the DEIS? No, I understand the commission. I am not familiar with the comments that you had made, but we'll certainly look into that and see if it's something that should be addressed in this document.
Who decides if it should
there was a comment that was made on the DEIS during the public hearing on the DEIS, or the written comment period that was extended after the hearing, that's something that should be addressed in the FEIS, and the applicant would be responding to that.
So the written comment period was extended to December 15th, and if those were sent to the planning board through an email or a letter before December 15th, they should have been part of the DEIS comments appendices and should have been responded to in the document. So if you have.
And if you could provide those, you could send those to the planning board, if you have those. You know when about they were submitted? Okay. So I can't have an answer for you right now, because it'll take forever to try to.
But we can
find
certainly
them,
look
but
into
we'll
that
certainly
concern
look into that.
and see when they were submitted, and if they were submitted as part of the process of reviewing the EIS, then we would look to get those comments addressed.
Right, if I could just make a couple of quick points. There's a secret process here. Mr.
Sir.
Chair-
Please,
I'm just saying, there should not be forward progress
please.
tonight and the decision made based on the gentleman's.
Not necessary, George.
So we understand, we're going to look and see if we have those comments, or if we need them to be resent. Nothing tonight, this is going through this document with the applicant, and we need to get through that.
If I could just briefly
Please.
note that SECR requires that agencies carry out its terms and requirements with minimum procedural and administrative delay, avoid unnecessary duplication of reporting and review requirements, and must expedite all SECR proceedings in the interest of prompt review. We have addressed all substantive comments on the DEIS as SECR requires. If there were substantive comments submitted on the DEIS, that's the intent of the final environmental impact statement, as your board is aware, to address those comments. If people are saying they made comments back in the fall when their public hearing was open for an extended period of time, as your consultant has noted, they will be addressed. And they will see how their comments have been addressed in the final environmental impact statement, which we are working towards completion.
Thank you.
I'll add that in our memo, because we went through the appendices, the transcript, all the letters, and we noticed that there was a few comments that did come in that were not part of the record and not responded to. So there's more than what we identified in our comment memo, which was an Orange County planning letter and 2 resident emails. If there's an additional letter from the Conservation Commission, then that should have been provided on in the revised FEI. You already know they're going to revise.
Understood. Ashley, further?
Nothing else unless the applicant had any questions, and I know if you didn't have enough time to review the memo, we could certainly discuss that.
Thank you, Ashley. Nothing further at this time on your memo.
Aaron?
You know what I just mentioned about the missing comments and responses? That's right in the upfront material of our memo. We think that should be addressed in addition to anything else that might have come in by December 15th, which was the deadline. That should be responded to in the next submission. We also requested, just for sake of ease of understanding and kind of an executive summary type of thing, to have a table in the FEIS up front that shows where we have impacts and what those mitigation measures are, so it's clear. That'll especially help develop the finding statement when we get to that point. The bulk of the comments that I have transmitted from AKRF are focusing on traffic and some mobile air quality related to traffic. That was the bulk of our review. The other consultants that looked at vegetation and wildlife, wetlands, they have a lot in their letters too that need to be addressed. Regarding wetland mitigation from CHA, for example. So I can speak to this. I can at a high level the stuff that we focus on in our memo.
If you would, please.
Yeah, so I'll skip ahead to the traffic. You know, one of the comments that we had was the applicant identified about 9 different intersections that have mitigation needed. Responsible for implementing those measures, respond and give us that applicant themselves, between KJ, the village of KJ, between VMG, and some other applicants developing projects in the town, those measures are going to be implemented by those entities. It's a kind of a mixed bag of who's going to do what. So one of the recommendations that we have, and I won't get into every single traffic comment, but one of the biggest ones was that for each of these mitigation measures, we recommend that, you know, as part of the board's conditions of any approval on this, that these mitigation first C of O is issued for the project. I know they probably haven't had a chance to review that and comment, but you know, there's a lot of different intersections that are requiring measures that are directly related to traffic from the project. So, you know, we felt, in consultation with Ashley's office as well, we felt that having that as a condition would make sure that these are implemented before the project's operational.
I think that it was one of the engineers from Woodbury. In their comments also spoke to the need to identify who ultimately is responsible for these various mitigations, and that's a very important thing for us to understand as part of our decisioning. So I would echo that we need that as part of the revisions.
Well, I think we did provide that. Ken Worstead, our project traffic consultant, can speak to that, but I think we did provide detailed information on which mitigation measures, who is responsible for each one.
Yeah, we
And,
tried.
I'm sorry, would you prefer if you have a chance to address each issue as we discuss them with Aaron, or do you want to hear all of the things and then address that holistically? What's better for you?
I'm flexible. I can address this one off the cuff because it's a larger one, and then we can go through others.
Okay.
This is one of the larger ones and I'm not the traffic engineer.
Oh, I
My
understand
colleague's
that.
not
Right.
here tonight to talk to some of these, and we're happy to have a meeting to discuss these, but the issue of the different responsible parties on the mitigation and the timing, if you want to go ahead and just summarize that, you can. I think we weren't disagreeing with the list of the parties. We just recommend that because there's so much happening here and there's so many different parties involved, that it's important that they actually get done before a CO is issued on the project, and there's a condition of approval by the board is a way to do that.
And as Aaron pointed out, there's a number of improvements that are proposed and talked about in here, and there's a variety of responsibilities for those. We did try to go and identify who was responsible for each of those, but we can detail that a little bit better and also talk about the timing. There are some that are out to bid right now. We're reviewing bids that were brought into KJ for some of the improvements. So we're expecting those to go to construction this year. But we can detail a little bit more on the anticipated timing of those, including the ones responsible for, that Monroe Commons is responsible for.
Detail those?
Where?
When?
As we complete this FEIS.
Okay.
On to these us and all the
Mr. Richmond, if you give me a little latitude. I understand what improvements I believe Monroe Commons is responsible for. Of the other improvements that are helpful for this project, which one would you say is the most mission critical, Ken?
Right now, I would say, and it's not detailed in here, but we've talked about it before, Bakertown Road from County Road 105 all the way up to Acres. There's a roadway widening plan for right there. Right now, effectively, that whole area comes to a single all-way stop, and that's what stops everything all the way back to the Route 17 bridge. There are traffic signals proposed there. There's roadway widening proposed through there. And all of those went out to bid, and the village received bids, I think, last week or this week. So that analysis is now being processed through, and then I would expect in the next week or two they'll select a contractor and start to implement and initiate the construction of those improvements.
Is the pedestrian bridge also a part of that project, or is that a separate
Not specifically the Bakertown, but it is part of the VMG responsibility.
Oh,
And,
okay, right.
That too
Thank you.
is also in design and anticipated to be constructed either this winter or early spring of 24, 25.
Thank you. Aaron?
I would just say, FEIS that you have in hand right now, it's response 9-12 on page 9-8 that outlines the different intersection mitigation measures and the responsible parties in brackets. So I think they are going to respond and it sounds like expand on some of that, and also consider our comment about the CO issue. There's also some comments on the air quality analysis that they did, which are more just providing some more backup for us that we didn't see. And, I'm happy to have, again, have any questions on getting, we're not saying that there's impact, we just want to work on that. Lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about the visual resources and, the simulations that were done. Just to bring to the board's attention, the applicant is going to be, as part of the site plan process, it sounds like, based on the responses that we've seen, they might be requesting some waivers on the lighting code, specific to a couple things. One, maximum height. Some of them will be at 5 feet. Requirement is 20. Not big a deviation, but it is a waiver. There's also some light spillage driveways that avoided because our boundary with VMG and there's residences there, and they're going to need the connections that they're proposing and lighting for safety reasons. So there's going to be some light spillage onto an adjacent residential property technically, but the idea of the concept is that they're providing access to those residents to get to the site. So, there's a little bit of
Give and take on that.
non-compliance on the light foot candle levels at the property line because of that. It's another waiver just to keep in mind that you have to consider.
Thank you.
Just briefly, I think you would agree that the impact has been adequately discussed in the FEIS.
That's correct. Wanted to bring those to your attention as site plan.
You have other questions for us or for our consultants at this point?
I don't think anything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley? Where are we at in the process?
I think the next step would be if the applicant would like to submit a revised version of the preliminary FEIS addressing the comments of the board's consultants, and that could then be
We have them before us.
Submission for the meeting is the 28th at noon.
Yes.
And if there's any questions, anything that the consultants would like to discuss with the board's consultants before then, any clarity needed for any of the comments, we could certainly be available for that.
We appreciate that.
So, board, I'd like your thoughts on, ultimately it comes down to, I think, that do we want to see the rest of these revisions or furthering of these revisions before we declare this complete, or are we getting to a level of comfort at this point? Nick?
Seems like we have to keep our finger on the pulse on this one, not only for our own due diligence, but for the sake of the town.
Pat?
I would just say that, I've been on the board for 4 years. This is the most sophisticated and detailed project that I think we've come across, and by proof of all the consultants that we have. So it's not an easy one to to approve. I mean, we've done a lot of work for a lot of years on this, but I think, for some of us on the board, I'm still not clear on a few things, and I need to catch up, probably with our consultants, to be more comfortable that we've answered all the questions that we need to answer, and be as comfortable, I think, as you are, Jeff, because you and Bonnie have been the ones that have gone into so much detail. So,
Thank you. Bob?
I kind of feel the same way. My concerns on the project from when I first heard of it was that a lot of the traffic concerns, which are being addressed, but I think we need to look at the answers that, as we move forward, are going to be provided before we can make any kind of rational decision about anything.
I'm hearing the board, I think the board does agree you would want to see the revised version of the FEIS before
Absolutely.
accepting, and I think that's appropriate.
I concur with the rest of the board members. I'd like to see this tightened up a little bit more before we get to an approval. We too are catching up on some of the consultant memos and that sort of thing, but I think we can look to get this all together, and we'll all be a little bit more prepared in a month.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you to your consultants. We appreciate all the effort. I appreciate, Mr. Shea, it is a detailed project, and it is, I think, probably one of the most in-depth that's been ever reviewed by your board. We are available if your board has any questions or would like to meet to discuss any particular issues. We look forward to continuing to work with you.
As do we. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next application this evening is Route 17M Executive Offices.
Good evening.
Evening.
Can you
Give
hear
us
me
one
all right?
moment, please. Sorry.
Yeah.
press this, it'll stay on.
Deal with that. Sorry, if you'll go ahead.
You hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Zach Sabo, Engineering and Surveying Properties. I'm here for the applicant, 17M Executive Office, LLC.
Could you just spell your last name for the record, please?
SZABO. Yeah.
Nice.
It's easier that way. So this project has been in front of the board before. It's been a while. I believe the last time this was in front of the board was back in March of last year. There were some additional sketches that were provided. I know we've attended some workshops to discuss, how we're going to move forward with this project. Since then, we're in receipt of a letter from Sean's office from back in April of 2023, and we've provided a little bit more detailed plans. The scope of the project is pretty much the same. We're still proposing a 36,000 square foot building for office space and associated parking. We've provided updated architecturals, different parking layout, and different entrance layout. I know initially there have been discussions about extending the entrance and reworking the entrance at 17M. Further analysis into the property, there was no easement that was provided on the western side property, so we scrapped that idea, and now we're just coming directly off the existing pavement that's there to access the site. There was another concern regarding the utility poles along the east side of the property. We've also looked into that. Those utility poles service the residential homes to the south of the site, and there is no Orange and Rockland easement for those utility poles. But we are maintaining them. We're not planning to affect those utility poles. They're to stay the same. At this point, we believe that the project is in a place where we can circulate for lead agency. We believe we provided enough detail to start that process. I believe that's where we left off. I'm here to accept any comments from the board and from the consultants.
Just a quick comment on the lead agency. So the board did, at your last meeting, declare your intent, and it has been a while, and the project was going through some changes. So when it came back in, I did do that circulation. So
Okay.
the 30 days hasn't passed yet, but by the next meeting, you'll have received any objections, or if the 30 days passes, then you'd be able to assume lead agency status.
Sean, you have some comments for us tonight?
I don't have a copy.
So first is with regards to the building. This building's kind of built into this. So the front elevation facing 17M has 3 floors exposed. The back side has 2. Based on the elevations and architectural plans that were provided, it's not clear that the height is maximum allowed. So that's a question for the applicant. Are they looking for a referral to the ZBA at this time, or do you think you'll be looking to have the architect?
I don't believe at this time we're looking to go to the ZBA. I think the intention was to meet that height requirement. So I will go back to the architect and to the client and discuss that.
I mean, if you're looking to get an interpretation for that to the building inspector, or you're welcome to get an interpretation from the building inspector yourself, because I believe height is measured as grade around the building. So.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Then I had some comments on the parking. First, an off-street truck loading space is actually required. Commercial structure, and based on the size of the structure, that space will have to be reserved. And with regards to the amount of parking on the site, there is basically parking from lot line to lot line in order to meet the zoning requirement. The board does have the ability, and I think we discussed it the last time this was actually before the board has the ability to reduce the number of parking spaces if the applicant requests it. Maybe that's something that the applicant can consider.
We'll look into that, yeah.
Next is with regard to the utility poles that Zach had brought up. There will be a little bit of grading within the area below the overhead wires that the applicant is reserving for the
John, I think I've discovered something on this. You see that what lights up when you talk? If you press that, it'll stay on.
Okay. Thank you. So the easement that should be provided for the utility poles, there is grading within it. I think that should warrant some review and acceptance from O&R for the work within the easement. The applicant has now identified a wetland off-site that will require a 100-foot buffer pursuant to the, my finger has to stay on it, pursuant to the town's local wetland law, and additionally, a permit will be required, an application to the planning board for the wetland buffer disturbance.
Understood.
A SWIP's
Sorry,
been
Sean.
noted, a SWIP's been.
Where is the
sorry,
wetland, where are we going into the wetland buffer on the project?
the southwest of the site?
Along the property line?
Jeff, if you have C100 in front of you?
I'm on C100.
See to the bottom left?
Okay. Yep, I see where the buffer zone runs.
That's the cruise across Route 17?
No,
No.
it's on the southwest side of the site. There's a pond up
Okay.
at the top of that hill that has
Right.
like an overflow weir where it enters that stream that comes down towards 17M. That is classified as a town wetland, so a 100-foot buffer is provided.
17M is at the top of that drawing, correct?
Yes.
correct.
So there is a stream that runs along the west side of the property
Okay.
and then crosses
Yeah.
17M.
Got it.
So a SWIP is going to be required for the project because disturbance acreage, 1 acre. And then I had some comments with regards to fire access for the site. So the proposed access from the existing access drive to 17M is, the grading is, exceeds 12%, whereas the fire code restricts that to 10%. Additionally, since the building is proposed to be over 30 feet in height, 2 access points will be required for the site. So that's a pretty significant layout concern for the building. Then I had a number of water comments. So based on some technical review meetings that the applicants had with Ashley, Bonnie, myself, and Noreen, the applicant is proposing to connect to Water District 8 that the town currently owns, which would be kind of behind Quick Check. So they are looking to extend that water main onto the site to provide potable water for the site. Additionally, they're proposing a fire storage tank, a pump house, and well to supply the fire storage tank for fire suppression for the building, which will be required based on the square footage and the occupancy. So I did have some technical comments with regards to the water. Additionally, DOH permit, water main extension permit will be required for the water main work. The applicant's going to need to get a permit from Orange County DPW and New York State DOT for the sewer main connection within 17M. That was kind of the high-level comments. I do have some more, technical comments for the application, but, I guess we should discuss with Ashley for 239, and Ashley already spoke on seeker.
Thank you. Ashley?
So it does require referral to the Orange County Planning Department under GML 239. Don't know whether the board feels there's sufficient information at this time, or if you would like to await for a future submission. That much additional from what Sean had mentioned. There's some architectural details that have been provided. You'll need, a narrative with all of the materials, colors, and everything for all parts of the facade of the building and any exterior improvements, including the lighting and the lighting spec sheets. If you can also calculate the size of the sign under the code and just include a little signage table showing that that complies with the square footage allowed by the code. You did give some details about the trees that are being removed. If you could have noted the total number of trees being removed and the total being planted in place of the trees being removed. The town does have the tree law that requires a one-on-one replacement or a fee in lieu. Make sure you have the tree protection details as well, and then there are some standard tree plan map notes that I could provide for you. And I think we had discussed this at a future meeting, but the owner's endorsement was filled out. It didn't have the person's name who was signing, so that owner's endorsement should be filled out by, it was a Jordan Stern who had signed last time, and should note that he's, a member in the LLC or whatever role he is, owner LLC. It also discussed there's that access easement that goes across this property to, I believe, the rear, and you were going to be providing a copy of that easement agreement. I don't know if you've located that.
I'll look into that. I'm not sure that a copy was provided.
Okay, so we're still in the circulation period for seeker, so we need to wait for that to be complete. There are some things that need to be addressed at this point. Do you have any questions for us?
Not at this time.
Okay, so then, does the board have any questions or comment at this point? Bob, can we start with you?
No, I don't. I think I think we're in need of getting the rest of the information before we can make any kind of decision on anything.
I concur.
Third.
Right, so I think we'd like to see a little bit more revisions before we're ready to send it off to Orange County Planning, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. I guess my only comment is, if you're going to consider looking for a waiver on some of the parking, as much as you can demonstrate about what the occupancy of the office space is going to be like, how many tenants, are possibly intended, that sort of thing, so you can demonstrate need for parking spaces. Yeah, it's wall-to-wall parking. And certainly, if you have the ability, and we do decide to grant a waiver on some parking spaces, obviously it would be beneficial to remove as many as possible that are in the wetland buffer. They're both, most of the ones, when you're getting closer to the entrance, are fairly inconvenient to the building anyway. They're there because they were required by code, I suspect, and less through utility and need. So what you can do to demonstrate that for us would be beneficial. Or a waiver if you're requesting that.
Sure.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next applicant tonight would be 94 Seven Springs Road, but it doesn't look like we have a representative. Did we hear from them, Noreen?
They are just on this evening to reschedule their public hearing. You had scheduled it for tonight, but it was subject to the applicant providing certain information about the well testing, the septic, and architectural information. So they didn't get that all into the board in time, so I would suggest that the board consider rescheduling the public hearing for your April meeting, but subject to their providing that same information beforehand.
The meeting rather than the workshop, correct?
Usually you do it
At our meetings.
would be a motion to schedule the public hearing for April 16th at 6:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as it can be heard, subject to the applicant's submission of architectural plans and information required under the code, the required engineering certification for the septic system, and well information satisfactory to the town engineer.
I'll make that motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Noreen?
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
Nick Napoli,
Aye.
Bob Garstack.
Aye.
Thank you. With that, we're done with our projects for this evening. I know the other thing on the agenda that we were going to look at is minutes. So Ashley or Sean, do you have anything else for us tonight? Okay. You may be excused.
At all.
Noreen, as memory serves, you were going to get those minutes back out to us again, And we haven't received those at this point, is that correct?
That is correct. I forgot about it and I was out sick yesterday.
Okay.
So when I looked at the notebook, when I came in, I was like, uh-oh.
So I would think both between the fact that a portion of our board is missing and that we haven't received that yet, I'd like to push that off to our workshop meeting, if we can reschedule for then.
Okay, I'll table them all and you'll have it tomorrow morning.
Terrific.
I apologize.
That would be helpful. Yeah, if we can get those at least a week before that they're on the agenda, it's going to give us a chance to get them a good look over, and we can try and get these done and finalized. Does anyone else on the board have anything else that they'd like to address?
I do.
Please.
When thinking about Monroe Commons and how sophisticated it is and how many moving parts it is, I'm not sure if it would be appropriate or not, but a kind of a teaching session with a number of the professionals that we have. There might even be a CE credit type thing, just going over every aspect of it so that when we're up here and we have these questions, the board is, just fully informed and prepared to approve or disapprove, know where the conflicts are, because I didn't realize tonight that we had it seemed to me, some disagreements on some of these things. I didn't fully understand it, to tell you the truth. I'll be very honest with you. So
I think that's a fair comment. I can certainly pass along that idea to Bonnie, and I will.
So to have a training session specific to general rather to the seeker process and that type of thing, but it wouldn't be specific to
Application.
a project, an application. That would be something, we could bring in certainly all the consultants to the next meeting and have them available to answer any of your questions, if that would be helpful.
yeah, that would be probably over the top, I think, but maybe just an agenda on a workshop for that project that's limited. Everyone would know there's no public comment. This is a workshop that is just for us and to be completely informed as to what's going on. Or completely informed, not as what's going on, that's a bad choice of words.
For you to speak with your consultants to ask any questions about.
Yeah, identified, because this is probably one of the most substantial projects that we've had and maybe will have. And I'm thinking that when that traffic starts on Integer Road, I can just hear, people complaining.
I think we could certainly discuss, have a consultant. That way you could have any of your questions answered. That would be the best way to. I just have to hesitate. I always caution against talking about a project when the applicant's not present, or, that, because anything you say now, they're not going to have the opportunity to respond to, but I appreciate, it's a valid point, and I think you could certainly arrange to have a meeting. It's not, you're near the end of this process. You're very near the end of the process, but that doesn't mean the process is over. So, of course, you want to answer any questions.
Is it inappropriate for us to speak to them about this project specifically? I mean, that's what our questions would be on.
I think that this is maybe getting into the realm of attorney-client, so I would suggest.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. So I think we can do that after we adjourn, you mentioned. All right, so if does anyone like to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting?
Make that motion.
Thanks. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.